So in this video, we're going to be looking at different weapon qualities and crafted weapons that you can use in PvP, PvE specifically. PvP will make a video later, but for this one, this test was basically just done with PvE, so we'll stick with that for now. So to start off with, the idea here is that I want to keep everything consistent, no variables at all other than the weapon itself changing. So with that being said, for these first 6 tests, I did Titan specifically. I didn't have, I had the exact same stats every single time, and so the only thing that was actually different was the weapon that was being used. So they were all fully repaired when I started, and then I didn't repair them until it was completely done each test. So that in mind, we can start off with seeing like what I ended up doing was the Val Runic, the Gold Runic, the Bronze Runic, a Repon Slayer, which is a right Slayer on a Titan, then just a basic exceptional weapon, and then the wrong Slayer on the Titan. So I think I used an Arachnid Slayer. And I just want to see like what actually happens here. So start off with, you would assume that the Val Runic would be the best one because it's the most expensive, it's the hardest to make, and it's kind of the top quality item you're going to get. And so with that being said, you can kind of see here our misses were very low in comparison to our swings. Our hit rate was very high, it was 86%, and then the average damage per swing was about 31. And so that's kind of like the base where we want to go down. And then when we're doing, say, a Gold Runic to a Bronze Runic, you can kind of start to see that these misses increase each time. And so the hit rate's going down and the average damage as well. So not only are you missing more, but you're not hitting as much each time. And then we moved on to the Slayer. So the Slayer weapon, just a basic Slayer weapon, they're pretty cheap on the server right now, was actually, which is news to me, just about as strong, actually stronger than a Val Runic in PvE. So there's some disadvantages to this weapon, but the price you pay for this is not very much, and if you're going to be hitting as hard as a Val Runic weapon is, then this is almost an ideal item to use, unless you're trying to min-max entirely. Moving on to the exceptional weapon, you can start to see now, well, these are very cheap weapons, and they're also not very good. So they're only going to be doing 18 damage, they've got a much lower hit rate than everything else, but that's kind of what you should expect with a weapon that's costing so little. You're only going to be paying about 300 gold for this, whereas a Val Runic weapon is going to be about 200,000. And a Slayer, right now, probably about 7 to 10k, so you can kind of see there, it's quite economical to use this weapon instead. And then the wrong Slayer, of course, you would never really want to do this, because this is kind of just if you're making a mistake. But it is kind of interesting. What it kind of looks to me here is that the wrong Slayer is basically just acting as an exceptional because they're pretty much identical in their stats when you're hitting. So if you're using a wrong Slayer, you're basically just swinging with a regular exceptional weapon. Not too great. So with that in mind, you would say that the Slayer is probably the best weapon you can use. And that's probably true other than the fact that if you're fighting in a place that's got a whole bunch of different types of mobs, if you're only using one type of Slayer, then you're going to be getting this wrong Slayer like debuff each time you hit the wrong mob. So that's kind of one of the downsides to it. And also, if you go into PvP, if somebody attacks you or you want to attack somebody else, then you're no longer going to be able to get that bonus. And the Val Runic hammer or Val Runic weapon would have a lot of PvP bonuses as well, which we'll get into in a later video. So it's really up to you at this point. The insurance prices are going to vary pretty significantly. So if we pull up this, I've got all of them listed right here, or shown right here. We can kind of start off with the Val Runic hammer weapon, katana. And you can see when you try to insure that, it's going to cost about 33,750 gold. Moving on to the gold one. So this one's going to cost about 200,000 to buy. And then insurance is about 33,750 each time. The gold Runic hammer, or gold Runic weapon, that one's only going to be 5,625, so it's getting a lot cheaper already to do. That one's probably going to cost around, I want to say 20,000. Then the bronze Runic katana, again, going down. It's only going to cost you 3,630 to insure. And then also this one's only going to cost you about 8,000. Then obviously the Slayer one is going to be very cheap actually to insure. You're only going to be paying 3,000, and it's going to be doing almost nearly as good as that Val one was. For a specific mob. And then of course the katana exceptional if you want to do that. I think it's very, very cheap to insure. 600 gold. It's actually just better to buy new ones. You shouldn't even insure that because it costs about 300 gold right now to get an exceptional katana, so there's not really any point in insuring that at all. So if we go back to this, you can kind of see here while this is the strongest overall, for a specific mob, the Slayer is a lot more economical to do. And so with that being said, there actually is one other thing that can happen in this game, is runic weapons can actually turn into Slayers. So when I originally did this test, I wanted to grab a Repawn Runic weapon, Repawn Runic Katana, but they're actually incredibly rare and hard to get, so I wasn't able to ever actually get one. However, I just recently did make an Agapite Runic Reptile Slayer, and if you can see it here, they kind of show up weird. They're not really visible unless you have this personal gear chest, but the Agapite Runic Hammer is going to make the eminently accurate power weapons. And sometimes when you do that, you can kind of see here, right here, that it says Slayer Reptile. So a normal one wouldn't have that. So like, for example, if I were to put this this one in here, it doesn't actually have a Slayer weapon on it. So we can go to Vanquishing. Just find the Katana right there. And you see it doesn't actually have any sort of Slayer thing on it. So you know it's not going to be the Slayer. But sometimes it'll pop up like this, and it'll actually look differently when you actually get it. So if we find that again, right here, you'll see that has that Slayer thing right there. And the way you'll be able to tell that it is a Slayer is the fact that it doesn't have the exact same, oops. Yeah, it doesn't have the exact, so I think I must have equipped it, that's why. Yeah, there it is. So if we put it right here, you can see it doesn't actually have the exceptional thing here, so it just says an eminently accurate katana of power versus an exceptional eminently accurate katana. So when it just says an eminently accurate, or it doesn't have that exceptional thing on it, when it's a runic weapon, it's going to be your key to know that it's a Slayer. What kind of Slayer it's going to be, you're not going to be sure until they put it into the gear chest here and look at it, and now you can see that that's Slayer Reptile. Maybe in the future they're going to make it so it's just visible. That would be nice, but at the moment, this is the only way to do it. So the question really is, how good is this weapon now? Well, it's incredibly good. It is the best weapon that I've ever seen in the game. I have a few ones for Vanquishing or for Val Runics, but they're not reptiles. So I only have one that's a Val Runic that's an Arachnid Slayer, so it's not as good of a farming weapon. With the Necro Tank and the tank in general becoming a very strong class, a lot of people are starting to use the one-handed katanas, and so what I did then was just to try to get a baseline, because I could no longer use this Titan, these Titan numbers, simply because now this is a different mob that I'm going to be using it on, so it's going to have different skills, so its hit rate, its armor is going to be different, so I'm not going to be able to just say, go hit it with this weapon and assume it's going to be similar to the Titans. But what I did do is give you an idea. So what I did is when I just went and farmed Varaxis, and what I did with that was just did the Slayer first. So now I used a Reptile Slayer, and the idea being that I can kind of compare it now to this Slayer here, so the Titan. So you can see the Varaxis Slayer is the Varaxis is a harder monster than the Titan, so you'd expect it to be getting hit less, and you can kind of see that. So the hit rate went from 87% to 73%. And the average damage was still about the same. But you can see here the Varaxis is like making us miss a little bit more. So with that being said, we can move on to the Agapite Runic. And you can see this massive increase in damage. So now you have a 50 average damage hit rate, average damage, and you have an 80% hit rate. So you went up 7% over the Slayer, plus your damage is significantly higher now. So it's not just the swinging or the hitting, it's the fact that you're going to be hitting a lot harder in comparison to these other weapons. You can see here this Agapite Runic Slayer isn't even comparable to these other ones. It is just so much higher. It's an absolutely insane item. So if you can get a hold of one of these, it's a very, very good purchase. But keep in mind, not only is it going to be incredibly expensive to buy, it's also going to be incredibly expensive to insure. So because the Slayer in the system and the insurance system in this, it adds a 10 times price on it. You can kind of see now that the insurance on this is going to be $52,500. So this is very, very expensive to insure. However, if you consider the fact that it is doing an insane amount of damage, if you're able to stay alive and not die, it's a very, very good item to use, and you'll be your top tier farmer using this particular item. Now, getting a hold of one is going to be a different story, but I just thought I'd mention that this is kind of something that maybe everyone should try to strive for to get, because it's going to make them the strongest farmer they can be. And so with that, that's all I have to say for this video. What I want to do next is look into discordance and see how it changes these statistics, and I'll do that in my next video, and we'll use this information in that as well. We'll be moving into a PvP video as well to show kind of like what each weapon does there. But for now, that's all we have.